The real estate attorney's hands trembled as she slid the property deed across her mahogany desk toward me. "Mrs. Castellanos," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "this land, your late husband purchased it in 1987. According to current market assessments, we're looking at approximately $8.4 million. I stared at the yellowed document, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the faded ink. How was this possible? 3 months ago, I'd been sleeping in my car outside a Walmart parking lot, surviving on dollar menu items and wondering if I'd ever see my grandchildren again. And now this woman was telling me that Vincent, my Vincent, who'd been gone for 12 years, had left me a gift that could change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began. My name is Margaret Rose Castellanos, and for 42 years, I poured my heart and soul into building something beautiful. Castellanos and Daughter Bakery wasn't just a business, it was 3 generations of tradition, recipes passed down from my grandmother in Sicily, the smell of fresh bread that had greeted our neighborhood every morning since 1983. Vincent and I had started with nothing but a small loan and a dream, working 18-hour days, sleeping on flour sacks in the back room during those early years. When Vincent passed from a sudden heart attack in 2013, I thought I'd die too. But I had our son, Michael, and the business to keep me going. Michael had worked alongside us since he was 10 years old, learning every aspect of the bakery. I'd always assumed he'd take over one day, that the Castellanos name would continue for another generation. Then he met Vanessa Hartley. I should have seen the warning signs. Vanessa was a real estate attorney, sharp as a knife and twice as cold. She'd walk into our bakery with her designer suits and her Bluetooth earpiece, treating our staff like servants. But Michael was smitten, absolutely blind to everything but her perfectly highlighted hair and her calculated smile. They married in 2019, a lavish affair that cost more than we'd made in 6 months. I paid for half of it. Vanessa's family claimed they were invested in other ventures. I remember standing in that overpriced venue, watching my son gaze at this woman and feeling a chill run down my spine. "Mom, you look worried," Michael had said, catching me alone near the champagne fountain. "Just emotional," I'd lied, forcing a smile. "My baby boy, all grown up." But the truth? I was terrified. The changes started slowly. Vanessa began suggesting improvements to the bakery. "This neighborhood is gentrifying, Margaret. We could triple our prices, renovate, appeal to a more upscale clientele. Our customers have been coming here for decades," I'd protested. "Mrs. Giordano, Mr. Chen, these people are family." "Exactly the problem," Vanessa had said, examining her manicured nails. "Family doesn't pay premium prices." Michael started siding with her. My son, who'd grown up wrapping cannolis alongside me, was suddenly talking about profit margins and market positioning. They pushed me to modernize, to cut staff, to replace our traditional recipes with trendy items. I resisted. The bakery was 50-50 between Michael and me. Vincent had set it up that way in his will. I had veto power over major decisions. For a while, that protected everything we'd built. Then came the day that changed everything. I was in the kitchen, supervising the morning bread batch, when Michael and Vanessa walked in with a man in an expensive suit. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, this is Richard Chen, our attorney," Michael said quietly. "Your attorney?" I set down my mixing bowl. "What's going on?" Vanessa stepped forward, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Margaret, we've been reviewing the business structure, and we found some irregularities." My blood went cold. "What kind of irregularities?" Richard opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Mrs. Castellanos, according to these records, you've been systematically embezzling from the business for the past 8 years. We're talking about approximately $340,000 in misappropriated funds." I actually laughed. It was so absurd, so utterly insane, that laughter was the only response my brain could produce. "That's ridiculous. I built this business. Every penny goes back into—" "The evidence is quite clear," Richard interrupted, his voice cold and professional. "Unauthorized withdrawals, personal expenses charged to the business account, falsified receipts. Mr. and Mrs. Castellanos have no choice but to pursue legal action." "Michael," I turned to my son, my voice breaking, "please tell me you don't believe this." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes destroyed me. Not anger, not confusion, calculation. "Mom, the numbers don't lie. We've given you every opportunity to explain, but—" "What numbers? What are you talking about?" Vanessa pulled out her phone, tapping through screens with her perfectly manicured finger. "These transactions, Margaret. The cruise to Alaska, $12,000. The new BMW, $48,000. The investment property in Orlando, $75,000, all charged to the bakery's business account. I've never even been to Alaska. I drive a 15-year-old Honda." "Then someone has been using your authorization," Richard said smoothly. "Either way, as the 50% owner and primary financial signatory, you're legally responsible." The next 3 months were a waking nightmare. They sued me, claiming I owed the business $340,000 plus damages. Vanessa, it turned out, had been methodically building this case for 2 years, creating false transactions, forging my signatures, manufacturing evidence so convincing that even my own attorney looked at me with doubt. "Mrs. Castellanos," my lawyer had said after reviewing the evidence, "I have to be honest with you. This looks very bad. They have bank statements, receipts, even email correspondence that appears to be from your account authorizing these expenditures. It's all fake." "Vanessa set this up. I believe you, but proving that in court will be nearly impossible. They've covered their tracks extremely well. The trial was a massacre. Vanessa had witnesses, employees, who testified that I'd been acting erratically, spending money recklessly, showing signs of early dementia." Michael sat beside his wife, nodding along to every lie, his face a mask of carefully practiced concern. "Your Honor," Vanessa's attorney had addressed the judge with rehearsed sympathy, "we're not here to destroy Mrs. Castellanos. We're here to protect a family business from further harm. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of financial misconduct, and we're simply asking that justice be served." My own lawyer was outmatched, underfunded, and frankly out of his depth. When the judge delivered the verdict, I felt my world crumble. "I find in favor of the plaintiffs," the judge had declared. "Mrs. Margaret Castellanos is ordered to pay $340,000 in restitution, plus $125,000 in legal fees and damages. Furthermore, her ownership stake in Castellanos and Daughter Bakery is hereby transferred to Michael Castellanos as compensation. Mrs. Castellanos is permanently barred from the business premises and from using the Castellanos business name. I lost everything that day. The bakery, my life's work, my son. The judgment wiped out my savings, the modest amount Vincent and I had managed to put away. They forced me to sell my house to pay the legal fees. Michael and Vanessa had even turned my grandchildren against me. Little Sophia and Marco, who I'd babysit every week, who I'd taught to make biscotti, they wouldn't even look at me when I saw them on the street. "Nana stole from Daddy," I heard Sophia whisper to a friend once. "Mommy says she's sick in the head." I ended up in a tiny efficiency apartment in a rough neighborhood, working the register at a CVS for $12.50 an hour. At 64 years old, after a lifetime of building something beautiful, I was starting over with nothing. The depression was crushing. There were days I didn't get out of bed, days I seriously considered just ending it. What was the point? My son thought I was a thief. My grandchildren were being raised to hate me. Everything Vincent and I had worked for was gone, now being run by a woman who'd probably never made a loaf of bread in her life. I stopped going to church, stopped seeing my friends. I was too ashamed, too broken. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon, 6 months after the verdict. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at a letter from the court about additional fees, when my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mrs. Castellanos? This is Linda Werner from Werner & Associates Real Estate Law. I'm calling about a property matter that requires your immediate attention." My first thought was that they were coming after me for more money somehow. I don't own any property. "Actually, ma'am, that's not quite accurate. I'm looking at a deed here, filed in 1987, for a parcel of land in what's now the Riverside Development District. The deed is in your late husband's name, with you listed as the surviving beneficiary." I almost hung up, thinking it was a scam, but something in her voice made me pause. "What are you talking about?" "Mrs. Castellanos, would you be able to come to my office tomorrow? I really think this is a conversation we should have in person." That night, I barely slept. I dug through the boxes I'd salvaged from my house, the few possessions I'd been allowed to keep. In an old accordion file marked Vincent's papers, I found it. A faded property deed for 15 acres in an area I vaguely remembered driving through once or twice. The next morning, I took 2 buses to reach Linda Werner's office downtown. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Castellanos, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I'm going to be direct with you. Do you know anything about the property your husband purchased at 4500 Riverside Road?" "Not really. I remember Vincent mentioning buying some land as an investment, but that was over 30 years ago. I assumed it was worthless, he never talked about it much." Linda pulled out a map and spread it across her desk. "This area was basically swampland in 1987. Your husband paid $42,000 for 15 acres. It's been sitting untouched all this time, with property taxes being automatically deducted from a small account he set up specifically for that purpose." "Okay," I said slowly. "So what's the problem?" She smiled. "There's no problem, Mrs. Castellanos. The Riverside Development Corporation wants to build a luxury mixed-use complex on this site. They've been buying up all the surrounding parcels. Your 15 acres is the last piece they need." "How much are they offering?" Linda leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "Before I answer that, I need to ask you something. That court case against you, the embezzlement charges, were they legitimate?" I was so shocked by the question that tears sprang to my eyes. "No," I whispered. "My daughter-in-law fabricated everything. She's a real estate attorney. She wanted the bakery, and she knew exactly how to take it from me." Linda nodded slowly. "I thought as much. I've been practicing real estate law for 28 years, Mrs. Castellanos, and I've seen my share of family betrayals. When I researched your case, the whole thing smelled wrong. Why do you care?" I asked, genuine curiosity mixing with my suspicion. "Because my sister went through something similar," Linda said quietly. "Her son and his wife destroyed her reputation to steal her interior design business. By the time the truth came out, she'd lost everything, including her will to fight. She died 6 months later, broken and alone." She straightened up, her voice becoming crisp and professional again. "I'll be damned if I let that happen to another woman on my watch." "The offer," I pressed. "How much?" She slid the property deed toward me, and that's when she said the words that changed my life. $8.4 million. Mrs. Castellanos. I thought I'd misheard. 1,000? Million. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the desk, struggling to breathe. "Are you all right?" Linda was beside me instantly, pressing a bottle of water into my shaking hands. "Vincent," I managed to gasp. He left this for me? He set it up so the taxes would be paid automatically, so you'd never have to worry about it. According to the bank records, he made a note in his files, "For Margaret when she needs it most." Linda's voice softened. "I think he knew." I sobbed then, right there in that office, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. Vincent, my sweet, quiet Vincent, who always thought 3 steps ahead. He'd left me a lifeboat, hidden all these years, waiting for when I'd need it most. When I finally composed myself, Linda had more news. "Now, here's what I propose," she said. "We don't just take this deal and walk away. We use this to expose what was done to you." "How?" "I have a colleague, Marcus Brennan, who specializes in fraud cases. If you're willing to fight, we can go after your son and daughter-in-law for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. With your permission, I'd like to bring him in on this." For the first time in 6 months, I felt something besides despair. I felt rage, clean, sharp, purposeful rage. "Yes," I said, "let's destroy them." The next 2 months were intense. Marcus Brennan was a bulldog in an expensive suit, and once he started digging, he found everything. Vanessa had been sloppy in her confidence. She'd used her work computer to create the false documents, left trails in email accounts she thought were secure. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, my former bakery manager, Teresa. She showed up at my apartment one evening, her eyes red from crying. "Mrs. C," she said, "I need to tell you something. I've been carrying this guilt for 6 months, and I can't do it anymore." Teresa had been one of the witnesses who testified against me. Now, sitting at my tiny kitchen table, she told me the truth. Vanessa came to me before the trial. She said if I testified that you'd been acting strange, spending money recklessly, she'd give me $15,000 and guarantee my job at the bakery. I have 3 kids. Mrs. C. I was terrified of losing my income, but it was all lies. I knew you'd never steal from the business, and after I did it, after I watched you lose everything, I can't live with myself. Did she pay you? Marcus asked. He'd accompanied me to this meeting. Teresa nodded miserably. She gave me $10,000 in cash, said the rest would come later. But she never paid the balance. And then last week, she fired me anyway. Said they were restructuring. Do you have any proof of this payment? I kept the envelope. It had her fingerprints on it. And she sent me text messages. I saved everything. Marcus smiled like a shark scenting blood. Teresa, you just saved this case. With Teresa's testimony and the digital evidence Marcus uncovered, we filed a motion to overturn the original verdict. But I wanted more than that. I wanted the world to see exactly who Vanessa Hartley was. I used a portion of the land sale money to hire a forensic accountant. What they found was stunning. Vanessa hadn't just fabricated evidence against me. She'd been embezzling from the bakery herself, funneling money into offshore accounts, using the business as her personal ATM. The new trial was very different from the first one. This time, I had a legal team that matched Vanessa's. This time, the evidence was on my side. I'll never forget the look on Vanessa's face when Marcus presented the forensic accounting report. Her carefully constructed mask cracked, just for a moment, and I saw real fear. These transactions, Marcus had said, his voice ringing through the courtroom, show that Mrs. Vanessa Hartley systematically stole over $680,000 from Castellanos and Daughter Bakery over a 3-year period. She then fabricated evidence to frame Mrs. Margaret Castellanos for her own crimes, destroying an innocent woman's life to cover her tracks. Michael sat beside his wife, his face pale and drawn. He looked at me once during the proceedings, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months' doubt. Teresa testified about the bribery. 3 other former employees came forward with similar stories. The digital forensics expert walked the court through Vanessa's clumsy attempts to cover her tracks. When the judge delivered his ruling, it was even more comprehensive than I'd hoped. This court finds that Mrs. Vanessa Hartley engaged in systematic fraud, perjury, and conspiracy to commit theft. The original verdict against Mrs. Margaret Castellanos is hereby vacated and reversed. Furthermore, Mrs. Hartley is ordered to pay $1.2 million in damages to Mrs. Castellanos, and I'm referring this case to the State Bar Association for disciplinary proceedings. He turned to Michael then, his expression stern. Mr. Castellanos, while you are not being criminally charged, your role in this travesty speaks to a profound moral failure. You allowed your mother to be destroyed based on fabricated evidence, without question, without investigation. That is not a crime the law can punish, but it is a betrayal that should haunt you. Vanessa was later disbarred and charged with fraud. She pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, but her legal career was over. The bakery reverted to my ownership. But here's the thing, I didn't want it back. Not the way it was, tainted by what had happened. Instead, I sold the business to Teresa and 3 other longtime employees for $1 and the promise that they'd keep the traditional recipes alive. They renamed it Mama Rose's Bakery, and every morning, the neighborhood still wakes up to the smell of fresh bread. The land sale went through $8.4 million, just as Linda had said. After legal fees and taxes, I walked away with just over $5 million. I gave $1 million to a foundation that helps older adults fight financial exploitation. Another $1 million went to setting up college funds for Sophia and Marco, held in trust until they turn 25, whether they want a relationship with me or not. As for Michael, that's been complicated. He came to see me about 3 weeks after the second trial. He stood at my door, and for the first time in years, he looked like my little boy again, scared and ashamed. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, I don't know how to apologize for what I did. I let him in. We sat in my new apartment, not fancy, but comfortable, with a view of the park, and I let him talk. "She convinced me you were sick," he said, "that you had early dementia, that you needed to be protected from yourself. And then the evidence seemed so clear, and I wanted to believe her because he stopped, tears streaming down his face. Because it was easier than believing I'd married a monster. You chose her over me, I said quietly. You let her destroy me without even asking my side of the story. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I filed for divorce. Sophia and Marco. They're confused, angry. Vanessa poisoned them against you, and I let her. I'm trying to undo that damage, but it takes time, I finished. We're rebuilding. Slowly. I see the grandkids once a week now, at supervised visits that Michael requested to help them readjust. Last week, Marco asked if I could teach him to make the Sicilian cookies again. Sophia's still wary, still processing, but she hugged me goodbye last time. Michael and I may never have what we once had. Some betrayals cut too deep, leave scars too permanent. But we're trying. That's something. I bought a small house with a big kitchen. Most mornings, I bake bread not to sell, just to give away to neighbors, to the homeless shelter down the street, to anyone who needs something warm and fresh. The smell fills my house the same way it used to fill the bakery, and it makes me feel close to Vincent again. Linda Werner and I have become friends. Marcus Brennan still calls every few weeks to check in. Teresa sends me pictures from the bakery. Business is booming, she says, and the neighborhood is thriving. I'm 70 years old now, writing this from my sunroom while bread dough rises in the kitchen. The late afternoon light is golden through the windows, and I can hear children playing in the park across the street. People ask me if I'm angry, if I'm bitter about the years that were stolen from me. The truth is more complicated than that. Yes, I'm angry. I'm furious at what Vanessa did, at how easily the system let her destroy me, at how my own son could turn his back on me without question. That anger lives in me like a small, hard stone that I don't think will ever fully dissolve. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that Vincent loved me enough to leave that land, to create a safety net he somehow knew I'd need. Grateful for Linda and Marcus and Teresa, for people who chose to stand up when they didn't have to. Grateful for this second chance at life, at peace, at waking up without fear gnawing at my stomach. The other day, I was in the grocery store when I ran into Vanessa. She was thin, drawn, wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days. Our eyes met across the produce section, and for a moment, time stood still. I could have gloated, could have made some cutting remark, rubbed my victory in her face. Instead, I looked at this woman who had tried so hard to destroy me, who had lost everything in her greed and calculation, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a vast, empty indifference. I picked up my apples and walked away. That's when I knew I'd truly won. Not because I got my money back, not because she lost her career and her marriage. I won because I refused to let her hatred turn me into someone hateful. I refused to let her cruelty make me cruel. Vincent used to say that the best revenge is a life well lived. I didn't understand what he meant until now. I live well. I bake bread and watch the sunrise. I slowly rebuild trust with my grandchildren. I help strangers through the foundation. I sleep peacefully at night, with no guilty secrets to keep me awake. And that more than any court victory, more than any amount of money, is what real justice looks like. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up before dawn. I'll make espresso and start the bread dough. The kitchen will fill with warmth and the smell of yeast and salt and promise. Maybe Michael will stop by with the kids. Maybe I'll take extra loaves to the shelter. Maybe I'll just sit in my sunroom and read a book, grateful for the simple gift of a quiet morning. Whatever happens, I'll face it, knowing who I am. Not a thief, not a victim, just Margaret Rose Castellanos, who loved deeply, lost everything, and somehow found her way back to herself. And that, in the end, is worth more than $8.4 million could ever buy.